Welcome to Sovngarde, the heavenly realm of the mighty Nords, people who'd only hope for a valiant death in battle so that they may be deemed worthy and allowed to feast and fight amongst great heroes of old. Sovngarde is the realm of Shor, the Nordic version of Lorcan, the chief of the Nordic gods who sided with the races of man after the creation of Nirn. Every Nord dreams of Sun beckoning them to cross the Whalebone Bridge to enter the hall where they may fight and feast for eternity with their ancestors, a place where the food is never ending and the mead flows like a waterfall. Some say Shor is gathering an army of the greatest warriors to take to battle against ancient enemies in a war to come. Who truly knows the desires of a god? But regardless, we as the last Dragonborn enter this realm of the dead to finally defeat Alduin and preserve the existence of the world. But before this triumphant moment that marks the end of the game's main storyline, we get to enter the Hall of Valor and see the many heroes that have earned their place here. Now, presumably in reality there are many more than a handful that exist here, game limitations and all that, but still there are a few named and not named individuals that have interesting stories that you may not know about. We are going to have to do a little deep diving, a little speculating, and ultimately we're going to have some fun. So welcome to Fudge Muppet, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scott, and today we're looking at the hidden stories of Sovngarde, the tales behind the souls that dwell in this Hall of Valor. So let's get right into it. We will start with a few individuals that are named, but seem to go mostly unnoticed, and they do have quite the detailed backstories. This is Nicholas, this is Hunrur, this is Elenda, and this is Ulfgar the Unending. There is a small chance that you've heard of one of these characters before, and if you've played the Elder Scrolls 3 Blood Moon expansion, then you may be familiar with Ulfgar the Unending. Well, all these characters are related, and let me take a moment to tell you the tale behind these individuals. Towards the end of the Second Era, 5 individuals gathered together in a common quest to find the entrance to Sovngarde, because according to legend, if you were successful in such an endeavor, then you will be granted access into the halls of mead-swilling glory. Ulfgar allied himself with Nicholas, Hunrur, Elenda, and Grimkel. Their travels led them to Solstheim, but it was here that Grimkel, who was a powerful sorcerer, betrayed them at a place called Brodir's Grove. Using powerful magics, Grimkel ambushed the others and tried to turn his former companions into stone. As it turns out, Grimkel was trying to create his own magical portal to Sovngarde. 3 of the 4, Nicholas, Hunrur, and Elenda, were turned to stone on the spot. And they became the 3 stones that you can see at Brodir's Grove in Blood Moon, but you can also see them at Brodir's Grove in the Dragonborn DLC. So yeah, those big stones you see, they were once 3 individuals turned to stone by a foul sorcerer. Now, Ulfgar was caught in this spell as well, but it had affected him differently. He had turned into living stone, which explains how he would continue to live for so long that he would appear in the Blood Moon DLC, which takes place in the later Third Era. So Ulfgar became Ulfgar the Unending, and he did slay Grimkel the Sorcerer, gaining vengeance for his fallen brothers. But here in this cave, he remained for over 500 years, still searching for the path to Sovngarde. The Nerevarine meets Ulfgar here during the events of Blood Moon, and ultimately helps him reach Sovngarde by dueling him to the death. And as we can see, Ulfgar did make it to Sovngarde along with his fellow brothers in arms who were betrayed. A nice, happy ending, but there are a few more details to discuss regarding this character. Firstly, you may be interested to know that he possesses a unique weapon called Stormfang, which is the very same Stormfang weapon that can be looted from the leader of the Reavers at Brodir's Grove. But the next curious thing is a line that he says when talking about Sovngarde in the Blood Moon expansion. He says, "Once my friends and I served Grimore and counted ourselves among his 500 companions. We helped drive the elves out of Skyrim." But wait a minute, I thought he just said this whole Grimkel altercation went down 500 years ago, which would indicate late Second Era, but Grimore and his companions came to Skyrim and drove out the elves well over 4,000 years ago. Could it be that Ulfgar here, being a man of living stone chilling out in this cave for all this time, has actually lost track of it? Does he perhaps think he's only been here for 500 years, but in reality, he's been here for thousands upon thousands of years? My first thought here is that Bethesda changed and added lore since then, so it's just an inconsistency, but that's an incredibly boring answer. And my job here is to make sense of it all within a lore context. Second thought is maybe he is just referring to just being part of the Companions faction, like they sorta serve under Grimore in an idealistic spiritual model kind of sense. But then again, he does specify that he was there and helped drive the elves out of Skyrim. So I think without a doubt, he was there serving under Grimore thousands of years ago, so perhaps he is far more ancient than he realizes. I mean, Solstheim was an important location in the war against the elves. The final army of the snow elves were destroyed in the Battle of the Mose Ring, where the Snow Prince met his end, so perhaps Ulfgar and his companions were here and took part in that battle. It could also potentially explain why he doesn't seem to have the same level of understanding about Sovngarde as the contemporary Nords do. Maybe, in the Merethic era, the afterlife was more obscured and less understood. Perhaps with the dragon cult's prominence, ideas of Sovngarde were lessened, as many would be told that they will serve the dragon cult forever as Draga. I'd love to hear your theories about Ulfgar the Unending, but regardless, here he is with his brothers in Sovngarde. Finally. Next, let's talk about some of the more so familiar named characters, and then we will get to a few more mysteries. Jurgen Windcaller is mentioned quite a few times throughout the main storyline. He is the founder of the Greybeards and the most powerful tongue of his time. During the First Empire of the Nords in the early First Era, tongues were the names of warriors who wielded the thumb in battle and conquest. Jurgen himself was a prominent tongue and leader of men. He, like other Nords, relished in the power of the thumb and the prowess it afforded them, but after the defeat of the Nordic armies at Red Mountain, he had a revelation. He pioneered what is now called the Way of the Voice, a pacifistic philosophy that mandates the use of the thumb only in reverence of the gods, a path to enlightenment, not power. He tried to convince the other tongues to his way of thinking, and he was successful. 17 tongues battled Jurgen, and he swallowed their shouts for 3 days until they lay exhausted, and finally came around to his ways. In the main storyline, you retrieve the horn of Jurgen Windcaller, but what is interesting is that people have theorized it may actually be the broken horn of Paarthurnax, perhaps gifted to Jurgen for his wisdom. Paarthurnax would understand Jurgen all too well. As a dragon, he constantly fights against his own inner nature to dominate, and he taught the thumb to the Nords in the first place to help them fight their dragon overlords. So perhaps he would thank Jurgen for showing the Nords another way, so that they would not end up like the dragons, abusing the power of the thumb for domination and conquest. Speaking of the time of dragons, these three heroes, Feldir the Old, Gormalaith Goldenhilt, and Hakon One-Eye, were three Nordic heroes who fought Alduin at the throat of the world and used an Elder Scroll to send him forward in time, leaving the last Dragonborn, born thousands of years later, to deal with the threat. Granted, when you do go to Sovngarde, these three heroes do assist you in fighting Alduin and saving the world. There isn't all too much to say about these guys that's new, but it is interesting that Mirac provides us a little bit of insight. He says, "They wanted to use me to deal with Alduin, Hakon and the rest. I chose otherwise." So they knew Mirac was Dragonborn, and they approached him trying to get him to help them defeat Alduin, but Mirac refused. So to be fair to them, they seemingly did try everything they could before they resorted to sending Alduin forward in time, an act of desperation. You may also notice that in this hall are various heroes of Sovngarde, and they have a bunch of generic lines, but one stands out.
Hail, Dragonborn! That honor is also mine. To our shared birthright, you'll bring new glory.
This individual is Dragonborn, which is a neat little tidbit of info, but most definitely not out of the question. There are likely many Dragonborn individuals that we do not know about, and there have been Dragonborn characters known to us in every era of history. We have Mirac, Wulfarth, Alesia and her descendants, Riemann and his descendants, Tiber Septim and his family line, and of course the last Dragonborn. The ones we know about are generally the lines of Emperors in Cyrodiil, but consider that at that we don't even know much about them. The Septim and Riemann lines are rather detailed in name, but Alicia's line is very unknown. We only know of 6-ish emperors of a dynasty that spanned over 1,000 years, and seemingly characters like Wulfarth, Mirak, and the last Dragonborn just popped out of nowhere. There is massive potential for Dragonborn characters throughout Tamriel's long history that we don't know about. This guy could have been like you, born with a dragon soul for reasons greater than you could understand, or perhaps he is an illegitimate son of an Alician or Riemann emperor. There's all kinds of speculative theory making to do here, but there just isn't enough detail to have any definitive answer outside of he's a Dragonborn Nord and he died in battle, hence earning his place in Sovngarde. On to Olaf One-Eye. In the First Era, this man was Jarl of Whiterun. This famed individual first earned great renown when he imprisoned the dragon Numinex within his very castle, forever giving the place its new name, Dragon's Reach. The skull of Numinex sits above the throne of Whiterun to this very day, and his growing prestige among the Nords would eventually allow him to be named High King of all Skyrim, bringing an end to the violent War of Succession, and on top of that, he even conquered the Reach. But if you're familiar with the Bard's College questline, then you may think the man a fake and a liar. This may be true. Svaknir the Bard claimed Olaf and his men came upon a weakened Numinex and captured him with little effort, a different tale to the traditional one where Olaf had a fierce battle with a beast atop Mount Anthor. Svaknir decried the High King Olaf a tyrant and a fake, and in response Olaf One-Eye had him imprisoned and destroyed all the copies of the verse that slandered his name. That seems a little bit sus, but what's interesting is that if you have completed the questline and then you reach Sovngarde, Olaf may say this: "You freed Svaknir, a fool of a poet, but an honest enemy who has earned my respect. Sadly, he's now lost in the soul-snaring mist. Defeat Alduin and his doom avert. I hope to greet him in this hall as a friend." It's interesting to hear that he refers to him as an honest enemy. Regardless, both these individuals can be found in Sovngarde, and we have made a video before exploring in depth the nature of this ancient king, so you can check that out. The final named character dwelling the halls of Sovngarde is none other than Grimore, the legendary harbinger of all Nords, who brought an army of vengeance back to Skyrim to punish the Snow Elves for the Night of Tears. His fame goes beyond just violence though. He is credited with being the first human historian, having transcribed Nordic speech using elven principles of writing. He also started the first line of Nordic kings, the very same kings who would extend the Nordic Empire into Morrowind, High Rock, and Cyrodiil, a line of kings that would continue until they ended with the death of King Borgus. But we already know much about Grimore, and there is another video on the channel that details his life thoroughly, linked below. But there is one final character that I'd want to discuss: Sun, the Nordic god of trials against adversity, the guardian of the whalebone bridge that gives entry into the Hall of Valor. Sun is a lesser-known god, a shield thane to shore, along with his brother Stun, who is the whale god of ransom to the Nords of old, but to most, he would be familiar as Stendarr, the god of mercy. Sun guards the whalebone bridge, and only those who can best him in combat may enter the feasting halls. Sovngarde is a beautiful place regardless, but it seems only the greatest of warriors may enter the VIP section that is the Hall of Valor. Sun is like the bouncer at Heaven's Gate, no slack-armed milk drinkers allowed. Interestingly, in the Book Varieties of Faith, Sun is described as an extinct god who died defending Shore from foreign gods. This is referring to Shore's ancient battles with the elven gods, the battles that resulted in him having his very heart ripped out. So perhaps Sun died defending him from the likes of Trinimac and Auriel. To note here is that Shore is the god of the underworld. He's a dead god. His throne remains empty in the Hall of Valor. Sun too died in ancient mythical battles, and here he is in the afterlife, guarding the whalebone bridge. No other gods are seen here in Sovngarde, so it's kind of interesting to note that these gods that have died have gone to the afterlife as well. How that all works likely isn't simple. Mythology is quite complicated, especially when it blurs with reality, but regardless, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the stories of the characters in Sovngarde. Of course, I left out the ones that can potentially be there, like Kodlak or Ulfric and so on, because we already know all about them. I wanted to focus on the ones in the hall specifically. I really love it when the games are well connected to the previous ones, such as Ulfgar's presence in the Hall of Valor with his companions. It just gives a nice bit of extra closure to a quest that many people played well over 10 years ago. Let me know who's your favourite hero feasting in the Halls of Valor. Thanks so much for watching the video. Give it a like if you learned something new, and please do subscribe for more Elder Scrolls goodness. My name is Scott from Fudge Muppet. Thanks again, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.